Lucia Castle as teacher here with the 9th episode, and we start with something slightly different, that is the analysis of the functions into the body. I will always have an analysis and a way of perspective that is voice oriented, of course, and today is gravity and anti-gravity, and you will tell me, what the hell, why? Has it something to do with voice production? We will see. So, gravity is a force that all life forms are subject to and had to adapt to, from simple forms to more complex ones. More than so, us, specifically humans, have developed an upright posture. We also come from aquatic life forms, and in evolution and in development, not everything is changed in every step of this evolution, so that we find some development of previous forms, and some will get separated and quite far from previously, and some other will remain pretty much the same origin. An example is, as in the last video, I touched slightly onto the hypaxial and epaxial concept of muscles, that has a sense from fascial point of view and from a neurological point of view. And this is the fact that the axis is the spine, the hypaxial being the one in front of the spine, the ventral ones, the epaxial being the one in the back of the spine, in the dorsal part. And this has a clear figure into the innervation of those muscles, being the hypaxial with a column singular for all the hypaxial, in which you have the nerves coming from the spine and getting to those muscles, and a different column for the epaxial. In our evolution and development, since from aquatic and then terrestrial and then in the upright position, we have changed some specific things, being our back a bit different than before. It is larger and it is more, how can I say, not horizontal, it's a more a plane surface than before. If you see horses, they are more rounded. You have the spine and you have the lateral that is rounded. For us, the lateral has become straight. And this is quite specific for us and for other mammals. When we talk about us, we are doing comparatively when it is interesting. I will not get so into, otherwise everything is a rabbit hole and we will lose ourselves completely. And I try to put some more ingredients into, but remain focused if it's possible. So what happened in this evolution from being more rounded on being more flat, these are opening of the front that made our sides being part of the back, that in doing that, some muscles, they are absolutely hypaxial, and they started as hypaxial, and we found the roots, the nerves, into the column of the hypaxial. Well, we found them in the back. And more than so, they are accessory respiratory muscles. So they're interesting for us directly. And into the fascial logic, because you start understanding that the fascia is the second skeleton of the body, it's the smooth skeleton of the body. So as the skeleton is something of a boundary for us, also the fascial system, and especially the fascia surrounding the muscles, that is organized by bigger bags within the pockets and the muscles, and then those bags are into other bags that go enveloping all the entire body. Those singular bags, we can say smaller ones, for the thoracolumbar segment, that is the one of our trunk, and that it relates to the hypaxial muscles or epaxial muscles. We have one clear fascia for the epaxial. Then we had from an hypaxial one another layer that, if you see, I will read a little later here, that it changes into the time. It comes, we developed a second layer, meaning a third layer of fascia, that is the medium thoracic lumbar fascia, the medium layer, and that it contains those muscles that now are being called intermediate. So they have an hypaxial innervation, but from a fascial point of view, they're intermediate in between the ventral and the dorsal. And this for us is very interesting, because when we want to make an intervention, we have to see how the body has its logic to have leverage into. We come back to gravity and anti-gravity. One important thing is, does the body use different forces to breath or for its function in gravity, anti-gravity management, in all the activities, positions, and in our specific upright posture? So, what it is that gives the movement of the breathing, the force for the lungs and for all the structures of the lungs and the pleura and wall of the chest to move and effectively do a breathing, and effectively oppose this breathing or help this breathing, because we have the inhale and the exhale. Are muscles that have just breathing functions, or are muscles that have shared function with breathing ones? Usually it is said that they share postural and breathing function. But at the level of the muscles, are they doing those muscles something different when they're breathing from when they are making all those different postural actions? Don't think so. Really don't think so. How the muscles work and what they do. We have fiber muscles that do the same thing in all the skeletal muscles. They contract, and the muscles shorten or elongate according to load, positions, context, if they are agonistic or antagonistic action. Every muscle can be agonist or antagonist, depends on the action we are doing and the position of the joints and the load. The contraction has the nuances of motor unit recruitment, more or less. The kind of fibers, yeah, we have different kind of fibers into the muscles. They are the type 1, the slow one. They have a slow twitch, and they are the resistant ones. The 2AA, number 2A, which are the intermediate. They are in between the slow twitch and the fast twitch. And the type 2B you find also as type 2X. It depends where you look and what articles you read. I think it's a question of timing a period of publication, which are the very fast ones and the fast twitch. The fibers we were talking about, the contraction has the nuances of the motor unit recruitment, more or less the kind of fibers, slow, intermediate or fast. The direction of the fibers orienting according to the kind of load and positions that we usually take, because it's a dynamic characteristic and can change. Also the kind of fibers can change, also the motor unit recruitment can change in a certain ratio. The contraction has the nuances of, those are dynamic characteristics, as I was saying, and in a pretty ample ratio changeable. And now that knowledge is going further and deepening, always more predictable, and thus constitute the tools we have and that we can leverage to develop and train. We develop even doing things, not thinking about training. We develop using and living in our daily life. We develop according to some specific logics also from coming out of the womb here, by breathing here and not being anymore into the amniotic fluid in which we breathe, but we breathe liquid. And all this has some rules that usually are of developmental and genetic kind, and others are environmental. The construction of the bones, meaning the shape of the bones and of the joints, and I lost track, sorry, because today I read a little. The shape of the bones, meaning of our structure, the shape of the joints and the logic biomechanical in which they are developed, and they are physically, mechanically there, and the planes of motions determine what? They determine what this action of the muscles is going to provoke into the directions, the speed, and the force and the strength and the characteristic of this activation. We don't have to forget, as I was saying previously, the fascia. We know we don't have, it's not common knowledge, it starts being, but it's not common knowledge, that the muscle cannot just activate as agonist and antagonist, but according to the fascia that envelops them, there will be an opposing and an elastic torsion, how can I say, there will be this tensegrity characteristic into the force that is not only transmitting the force, but it's also changing the directions of this force into the outcome of this contraction. This kind of contraction will not only become movement in the outer environment, but will become also some activations, some stresses and some functions into the tissues, the reactions into the tissues and metabolic of these actions and contractions on the organs and on the fluids. One example I yet made was on the heart and the heart volume by the activity of the diaphragm. We can go further and put into the account the cascade of adaptations muscles contraction determine. This will be for one specific episode with one article very, very important for training purposes, and I will let for there. A great part of modern practices are into the planning and account of those, and into the shaping of the outcome we want by leveraging in parallel or inconsequential those different planes of actions that we are going to see and I yet said. The great primary force which I use constant constraint, as we said, it is gravity. That, since we have always had, and it doesn't change for us here, it has shaped body biomechanics and body functioning. So to be used at the same time as a gravity or anti-gravity management, and for the purposes of the body. Just to say, the fluids in the upright position would not have really tendency to come back up. And we have a complex system to make for the blood and for the other fluids of the body to move and come back and be in the correct homeostasis, in the correct balance, in the correct ratio, in the correct characteristics everywhere at any time, not depending if you are seated as I am, not depending if you stand, not depending if you run, not depending if you lay down, or whatever we do. And we are quite good in having this balance maintained in all the activities we do. The primary force for all those activities are the muscles, the smooth muscles or the skeletal muscles. The functions of the body has to be taken into the constant anti-gravity function, anti-gravity, so it is convenient to analyze these since they do not act in contrast, as I was saying. And when it is commonly said that respiratory muscles have a shared postural function, what we are saying is that in the same action we have a postural and respiratory effect of the same action. And this to me is the point, because we don't look at that in that way, usually in singing field, or I don't have knowledge about that, that is common knowledge, that is like that. Meaning that it's the same exact action, not a different one. So that for a different one we have what we usually call agonist and antagonist. When you see, when I was talking about the positions of and the evolution of the positions of the posture of Miley Cyrus, and you can see that in every kind of singer. Being still or moving, being still is never being still, is being more stable in the outside while inside we are moving. But usually we move, and very often we move for many styles and most for basically all the styles. When we move, we are not moving for choreography. We can move also for choreography, but we move to sing, to determine and to make leverage on the respiratory action and on the tension of the body, that is the instrument we are going to play, for the singing. Absolutely for the singing. Today I will remain into the respiratory action directly, and then for the tension and the how can I say, positioning of the body and the tension to become an instrument. I will do again another episode and just realize that a violin, if it's made into pieces, when you're relaxed, pretty more, or the chords are not under tension, or every part of the violin, it's not well connected and well glued, it will not be tense enough to transmit the oscillation from the chords to all the structure to have the sound of the violin. We don't have so smooth instruments. Yes, we can have, but to play faster, to play with groove, to play, it must be more tense. And under such a quantity of tension, it will not transmit the oscillations, and there will not be the sounds we perceive, and they will not have rhythm, and they will not have the characteristics of our music. And since we are the instrument, we also have to realize that we have to create a certain degree of tension, and also there it depends on the song, on the style, on the energy and characteristic of the song or the music that we are going to do, or the different styles. But a certain kind of tension, a minimal kind of tension that is a certain specific, is required just to have a sound production. It can be in a smaller part of the body that we focalize into this tension, and also there will be the difference into what is a more colloquial style opposed to a more heroic or energetic style. and there are also, it is all the varieties of styles we have seen for a long time and in a lot of periods, and the kind of energy we want to transmit, and the kind of band we have, and the kind of the instruments we are playing with, because it is a great, huge thing to not only breath management but sound management. And sound management, we know in voice, we have seen all the nearly infinite nuances that this instrument can have. So I was saying, it is exactly the same action. Why gravity and anti-gravity? Because to have all the nuances of our activities, the muscles do not perform only anti-gravity actions. Otherwise we will just jump. We will not walk. Walk is a sort of jumping with a different vectorial partition. We have a vertical partition, that is the anti-gravity, and then we have an horizontal partition, that is the moving forward or the moving backwards, or the torsions. How we do those? We have the oppositions of the muscles, and for that into training it's quite known the differences between posterior chain and frontal chains and frontal muscles, again apaxial and dipaxial, but here we have also into the back of the limbs, while apaxial are the limbs too. And then we have the braking muscles, which are the stabilizers, the horizontal structures. One thing that we don't realize usually is that if you think when you jump, you don't feel the muscles activating for the jump. You feel, I'm gonna say, a preparation into the tension for the jump, but you don't feel really the activation of the jump. I have not clear and I have not found yet, and I have not thought about to make an hypothesis because it's very, very complex, and of course I'm not, I don't know. I don't have a hypothesis for everything, and it's a lucky thing, otherwise I would be really, really a charlatan. If the posterior chain is the one really jumping, or are the muscles as the diaphragm that we don't perceive directly, those with which we jump. Meaning that in training, very often in voice, we have a problem that looks like a problem in control, but I've developed the idea that it's a problem in perception. That for what we call the sustain, I made the hypothesis that the sustain is the anti-gravity muscles, the anti-gravity force, exactly the same. And we have the problem that it's not perceived when it activates. It is perceived, the co-activations, they are perceived, the interactions into the system when it is activated, but it's not perceived when activated. My hypothesis is that since it activates all the time to maintain the muscles, to move, etc., we would really get crazy if we could perceive it. It would be a disturbance so huge if we could really feel, as when we feel, I want to activate my, how can I say, I want to activate to resist a weight coming. I don't know if it is because we perceive the braking system. I have no idea. I have really no idea there. But what I know is that the function, the anti-gravity, that is the sustain, it's absolutely controllable, but it is tricky because we don't perceive directly its activation. Is it what, and it is not because just, perhaps it is because it is the reaction to an action we are doing, or it is because there are muscles as a diaphragm that are not innervated to be felt directly. This is one of the questions I've opened, and if you have some ideas, it would be very nice to know about that. To come back to the system gravity, anti-gravity. Why I put that at the center? Because since they do the same action, and we leverage the same, and we live with the gravity, anti-gravity, and we have developed more for the basic functions that are the breathing and the anti-gravity. When it is to our specific human activities, that have developed different brain parts and kind of controls, but they have not developed really yet in the evolution, perhaps we do not need, into the body. When we want to change or to leverage or to train, it is convenient to see the basic functions, because it helps to focus and to really understand how we can leverage precisely somewhere, and then to put back into all the recipe we are doing, but controlling the ingredients in a more sophisticated way. Just to finish, in the time we have many practices from a training point of view, from a rehab point of view, from a voice training point of view, from a sport point of view, to solve or to put back or to leverage those postural gravity, anti-gravity forces. Those you will find that they have a logic that can be developmental, as in the chapter that you will find into those resources. And I put a photo into clearly the Pilates. That is not developmental, but it has a logic of developmental inside, because it makes leverage on what? On the first postural segment that we develop quite strongly, and that if it's not well developed, it's a problem. And the Alexander technique make leverage on this. Also, that are the epaxial muscles, the trunk muscles, the spinal muscles, that they are at the basis of our postural development and our integrity. Things just that when we were four-legged, they were the anti-gravity system, because they had to preserve the spine from the tendency of gravity of crushing it. So they're very strong, and they still, even if we are upright, they don't have a different logic completely. And the different logic is the one applied to the hypaxial muscles that will straighten it up. And the elongation of the spine that we have changes in some sort, but the basis is still the epaxial, and there you find the logic of Alexander technique. It's a logic. Then we get to upright position. In the upright position we have the functional movement and the joint by joint approach. The fascial is interesting because it will tell us with which logic we have to act when we have a problem in some place, because it will not act directly, or it will not, this muscle, do a certain function if the fascia will not, how can I say, if the fascia will interfere, or it will be in contrast. So we have to take into account also this. And sometimes you have an evolutive logic into the fascial system, and this is interesting to make leverage from a different segment into a function that is part of the same fascia. So we have many logic we can intertwine or separate according to the intervention we want. Starting seeing something. See you next week.